Hi, class. Here's a video explaining impromptu and extemporaneous speeches. So first of all, let's talk about what impromptu means. Impromptu is an adjective that means made, done, or formed on or as if on the spur of the moment, or composed without previous preparation or off the cuff. And it could also refer to a musical composition for those of you who know a little bit about music. If you're playing something and you aren't really preparing anything ahead of time for it, it's an improvisation. There are some impromptus, like the fantasy impromptu, which are supposed to sound improvised but are actually written out. Anyway, the basic thing is that an impromptu is going to be a kind of off the cuff composition or an off the cuff speech, something that you aren't necessarily preparing ahead of time like you have with your other speeches. Now, extemporaneous is going to relate more to what you've done in your previous projects. This is where you, at the very least, know about your topic ahead of time and you're able to prepare some kind of notes. You might hear this whenever a professor is giving their classroom speech, or if you're asked to prepare something ahead of time, like with your informative speeches or your persuasive speeches, where you are preparing it, but you aren't necessarily reading a speech directly from your notes, like completely written out. It's something where you've looked up the information, you've had some time to practice, and then you deliver the information to your audience. All right, let's take a closer look at the impromptu style. So, as I said, it's an unplanned topic, little or no preparation. Usually it's going to be a shorter message, about 2 minutes at the most. For you guys specifically, I'm looking for 30 seconds to a minute. So not anything super long, just showing that you've put a little thought behind it and figured out how to talk about your given topic for a short period. And you won't really have time to prepare visual aids. If you decide to include something, of course, you are welcome to. But usually, because of the impromptu nature, the unplanned nature of this, that means you won't really have time to prepare something. And a few examples are whenever you have a business meeting, sometimes you'll know that you have a meeting with your boss and with other people in your department or different departments, but maybe your boss decides they want to hear an update on a project you've been working on. Well, you technically know about the project and everything, but you didn't know they would ask during the meeting. So that would be considered a kind of impromptu speech. Sometimes people ask for toasts whenever they didn't necessarily tell you ahead of time that you are going to provide a toast for the event. And sometimes you'll have different chance social interactions with people. If you're meeting somebody new and you have to introduce yourself, or when you introduce yourself in class, or if you have to give an elevator pitch. Usually elevator pitches are a little more planned, but in general, you don't know when you might have that opportunity. So it would be considered more impromptu. Now, extemporaneous, as I said, is more planned. It's something where you at least have the ability to go into a little more detail, to research your topic a bit more, and you have some knowledge about the topic before you give your speech. And you're most likely using an outline form, one of the longer outline forms like we saw with the introduction, with a thesis statement and 3 body paragraphs and a conclusion with some kind of call to action. And you also will probably have visual aids as well. A few examples, of course, would be the informative or persuasive speeches you gave, your if you're giving a lecture somewhere or asked to speak at an event, then that would be an extemporaneous speech probably. You wouldn't necessarily read word for word from a set of notes or a piece of paper or anything. There are some instances, as we saw with your special occasion speeches, where those would be a manuscript style where you're actually reading something that you prepared at least somewhat ahead of time. And another would be a job interview. So you are able to prepare, you know more or less what kinds of questions they're going to ask, and you can provide that information and know more so ahead of time what's going to happen compared to an impromptu style. Sometimes with interviews, those can be considered a combination of the two because occasionally potential employers will ask questions you won't necessarily be able to prepare for. But as you experience, interviewing for jobs or going to different places, then you'll have a little more of an extemporaneous style where you're preparing ahead of time and able to answer those questions instead of them being quite so off the cuff. So, preparing an impromptu speech. Now, your topic is mostly out of your control. As we've discussed, this isn't something where you're necessarily preparing a specific topic, you're choosing something and then explaining it to your audience. So, what can you do about it? Well, you can practice speech outline patterns. You can practice reframing a topic, looking up different words or phrases and figuring out how to relate them to something you actually do know. So, as I said, the while the topic is mostly out of your control, you're able to practice those speech outline patterns and reframing topics to help you understand how to approach something when you don't necessarily know the what the information will be. Now, a few keys to success: keep it short and simple. The KISS method is very important and it especially applies to impromptu speeches. These are going to be short. Don't try to make it complicated. Make a quick outline for yourself and you should be ready to go. You can use the prep organization method, which I'll go over in just a second as well, to help you stay organized, keep your thoughts together, especially if you're starting to panic and concerned about being able to put something together before you have to go speak. And of course, you should focus on your beginning and ending. Whenever you are preparing a speech, one thing to keep in mind: people usually remember your ending the most. That's the last part they're going to hear. You want your beginning to catch their attention also. And between those 2 points, the body, of course, is important. However, it's less important whenever you have an impromptu speech where you're trying to string together ideas and create a cohesive narrative. It's more important about getting their attention at the beginning and ending with some kind of strong call to action or other information. So, the outline format and the prep method. As we saw, a basic speech outline includes an introduction, usually with some kind of thesis statement, a body with points and examples, and conclusion with generally speaking, a call to action, some way for your audience to absorb the information and react to it. So, as I just said, the introduction is very important because that's your way of introducing the audience to your ideas and also getting their attention. And your conclusion is going to have to remain somewhat memorable for them to understand what's happening and for them to react to the information you've just given them. So the prep method is point, reason, example, point. Now, with this short outline format, you'll be able to approach pretty much any topic and provide a reasonable understanding of it for your audience. So, here's an example of how you could apply the prep method. Let's say you're given the topic of cameras off during a virtual team meeting. Now, the first point relates to your topic and is your kind of thesis. Human resources are reporting numerous requests from employees to be allowed to leave their cameras off during routine virtual Zoom meetings. And why are why is this important? Why are we addressing this? The reason most frequently given is people are saying they are fatiguing during virtual meetings due to Zoom strain. I'm sure several of you who have participated in those kinds of meetings where you're on a video call for an hour, 2 hours, unfortunately, sometimes 3 hours, understand what I'm saying. And a few examples. So we've established our point related to the topic, which is HR reported requests from employees to leave their cameras off during routine meetings. And the reason is they feel fatigued from all of these virtual meetings. So our examples are of why they're having trouble, of course, include maintaining focus when you're staring at a grid of faces, seeing yourself on the camera and not responding, being physically constrained in a small space, having to sit in that upright position in front of the camera the whole time, or having to arrange different aspects of your life, like if you have children or animals or other people who share your space where you're required to have these meetings, having to rearrange them every time you have one would make it very, very difficult. And having your colleagues in your personal space, in your home, without having some kind of, formal invitation with them or something could also be an issue. And the last P in prep is our point again. So we're coming back full circle and saying that's why we've asked human resources to develop a set of guidelines to cover when cameras need to be on or off. So we're reinforcing that point and including a kind of conclusion. And we're also including a suggestion and a call to action for our audience at the end, where we say, if you have any suggestions or points, to turn them in by Friday. So as you can see, we're starting with the initial point related to the topic, then reason, examples, and a concluding point that includes some kind of action. Now, this isn't the only method for developing an impromptu speech. There are a few other approaches. Here are a couple more. Now, the timeline method is where you're looking at a linear approach. So we're usually looking at like past, present, future, maybe an event explanation, like what led up to an event, what was the event, and what were the results. You'll see that a lot with history or with certain types of documentaries where they have that kind of approach. Uh, Also, if you think about the way you wrote your persuasive presentations, you were looking at a problem solution orientation or maybe a cause effect remedy. So, a lot of different linear approaches. We're starting with the topic and then making it follow a particular pattern, whether it's the, actual timeline, past, present, future, or if we're looking at a cause and effect type of timeline. Now, another approach is reframing or quote hijacking a topic. And what that means is you're going to plan and research possible ideas that have usually either a local or a global narrative. And then you take whatever your topic was and you relate it to those things that you already researched. And you'll see that a lot in political debates. Often, speech and debate clubs will have something where they're they'll give someone a particular topic. Usually with those, though, there's a little more preparation, but occasionally there are ones where you are required to create an impromptu speech. And you'll see that whatever the topic is, they'll find a way to relate it to something else that they already know or that they and their audience have a shared understanding of that particular idea or frame of reference. So, preparing your speech, practice using the impromptu style. Look for different words or quotes. See if you can relate them to different things. Or if you have maybe a friend that you want to practice with, you can practice with them. Review the different types of outline formats, figure out to, you know, how to use all of those different parts of the introduction, in particular, creating a thesis idea and adding it into your body and your conclusion. And of course, this one is a little more fun. It's a very loose style in the sense that you don't have a lot of time to prepare a specific topic. However, you will have a little bit of time to look up some information if you need. Most importantly, have fun with it. It isn't a big deal if you have issues with it or if you feel nervous about giving this kind of speech. This is the kind of speech that usually makes everyone a little bit nervous. So you definitely aren't alone. And it's something to help you just practice getting up and talking in front of people when you don't have a lot of time to prepare. Now, here are a couple of example videos. I'm not going to play them right now, but I do encourage you to watch these on your own time as well and see how they relate their given topics to within their speeches. Now, these are both from people who are in some kind of speech and debate club. So obviously, I don't expect you to have something quite as polished as theirs. This is more of an example of what you want to go toward, what you want to practice. If you want to practice impromptu speaking, then this would be more of a direction to go in. And I mean, if you're able to do it, that's awesome. If you have a little bit of trouble with it, that isn't a big deal. Like I said, this is something where it's just practiced over and over again. And these people, as I said, have a little more practice than you probably do with it. But the point is taking that leap and giving it a try. And here are some more references if you want to look up additional information about impromptu and extemporaneous speaking. And that's it for today. I will see you guys in class.